airstrike. Joining me now, California Representative Ted Lieu, a Democratic member of the House Foreign Affairs and Judiciary Committees. Awfully glad to see you. Let's get into it here. Because, Congressman, your fellow lawmakers, they all received the same information. Yet, if you hear those four different voices, I mean, there are two stark, contrasting tales here of two stories. What do you make of this split?
I went through that briefing, and I agree with Republican Senators Mike Lee and Rand Paul that briefing was sorely lacking in details, in information. It was basically essentially trust us, and that's not what they should be doing. The administration should be providing actual evidence to members of Congress. I've learned more from watching MSNBC and reading the paper than I have from that briefing. And at the end of the day, it's also clear we are less safe now than we were at the beginning of this year because of Donald Trump's impulsive actions.
Did you hear anything about 4 embassies being targeted, as the president claimed last night on television?
So I don't want to get into details of what was said in that briefing. What I can say is the public reporting shows that the administration's story on what constitutes an imminent threat keeps changing. And whenever that happens, it causes the American people to ask, is the administration simply making stuff up?
Okay, that's a sobering concept. Let's get to a new poll, and this one comes to us from USA Today and Ipsos, in which it shows, sir, that 55% of Americans say Soleimani's killing has made the U.S. less safe. That is more than double the 24% who believe it made the U.S. more safe. What goes through your head when you see numbers like this?
That first of all, the American people are smart, and they understand that we need to have a strategy in Iran. And it's very clear that as a result of Donald Trump's reckless actions, the following bad things have now happened. Iran has said they're no longer abiding by nuclear limits on their nuclear program. Iraq, which is one of our allies, has just voted to kick U.S. troops out of its country. And then Iran launched a bunch of missiles at U.S. troops. This was all avoidable. We're clearly less safe now than we were at the beginning of this year.
So, look, there's been a lot of conversation that surrounds what precisely led to the killing of General Soleimani. And we're learning from a new Wall Street Journal report. Here's the quote. Some high-ranking officials who ordinarily wouldn't be consulted in advance and leaned on to later explain it publicly said they learned of the action from news reports. I mean, what does this tell you, sir, about who the president is getting his advice from, and does it concern you?
For the last 3 years, Donald Trump has shown that he is impulsive and reckless when it comes to decision-making. And what's even worse is that he puts his own interests above those of U.S. national security. It's one of the reasons he was impeached, because of his abuse of power of his office for putting his own interests above that of our country. And if the Wall Street Journal's article is true, then this is highly disturbing.
So as we turn to impeachment, though, there are remnants of the Iran issue in this question, because according to that same Wall Street Journal report, the president told associates he was under pressure to deal with Soleimani from GOP senators, whom he views as important supporters in his coming Senate trial. Do you believe that the president's impeachment influenced the Soleimani strike?
It would not surprise me. I know other evidence than what I've read in the Wall Street Journal newspaper. I do note that it is consistent with Donald Trump's behavior, where he continually puts himself and his family over that of the United States of America. And so I would like to see if there's additional facts that come out from the allegations in that story.
With regard to House Speaker Pelosi now saying that she's going to send over both articles of impeachment to the Senate this coming week, what does that process look like, and how soon might we see a trial begin?
I think it's important to take a step back and ask, why was Donald Trump impeached in the first place? It's because he abused his power in soliciting a foreign government to help his re-election campaign. That is illegal. It is unconstitutional. He was impeached for that, as well as obstructing Congress. Now the American people deserve a fair trial in the Senate. And whoever heard of a trial with no witnesses and no documents? That's absurd. And it's also something that the president should want, because if there's a fake trial in the Senate, and if he gets acquitted, that would be a fake acquittal. So all fighting for the same thing, and hopefully the U.S. Senate will do the right thing and have witnesses and documents for the trial.
You know, I'm reminded that when you say the word fake, the president used the words fake news to describe that Wall Street Journal report that we just discussed. But let me, on the heels of what you've just said, we have GOP Senator Susan Collins, who's told her local paper that she is working with a fairly small group of Republicans to ensure that witnesses can be called in the Senate trial. She later told NBC News that it's important that both sides be treated it fairly. How much influence and impact do you think she might have in shaping whether or not there are witnesses, how this trial plays out?
There are about 6 or so Republican senators are facing difficult re-election campaigns. The polling is very clear that the overwhelming majority of Americans want a fair trial in the Senate. That means having witnesses and documents. I don't think these 6 or so Republican senators want to vote no on having witnesses or documents for the trial. I think that's one reason Susan Collins is working so hard to make sure that there's actually a fair trial in the U.S. Senate.
But even beyond that, in terms of the who, sir, President Trump is now signaling that he would block testimony from his top aides, and that would include former National Security Advisor John Bolton. As you know, he said he would testify if he was subpoenaed. So take a listen to the president.
I would love everybody to testify. I like Mick to testify. I like Mike Pompeo to testify. I like Rick Perry to testify. I want everybody. But there are things that you can't do from the standpoint of executive privilege. You have to maintain that. So we'll see where it all goes.
I'm curious your reaction to that. And would the prospect of executive privilege be able to apply to John Bolton if he says, no, I will comply with a subpoena?
The president is lying. He doesn't want those witnesses to testify. If he wanted them to testify, they already would have testified. And so American people need to ask, well, why doesn't the administration want those witnesses to testify? In addition, executive privilege cannot be used to cover up evidence of criminal misconduct. The president was impeached for engaging in illegal activity. Executive privilege would not apply to any of these witnesses. And he can't stop John Bolton from testifying. John Bolton is no longer in administration. John Bolton can do whatever he wants to do.
California Representative Ted Lieu, very good to see you. We'll look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.